Good evening, everybody. It is 9 o'clock on my particular clock, which would be on my computer. I want to welcome you tonight. Welcome to Food Addiction, Fair and Firm. FAIR stands for Food Addiction is Real. I don't think there's any debate among most of the people watching this that food addiction is very real. FIRM stands for Freedom is Recovering Mindfully. And that's what we have to do. Learn about recovery, making it mindful, meaning taking an active role and putting forth effort. Thank you for joining me tonight for this weekly educational and conversational discussion about food addiction. I'm Dr. Connie Stapleton, in case you're joining us for the first time, and I've worked professionally in the field of recovery from addictions for the past 25 years. Makes me feel like time is going by very, very quickly. I've also been in recovery myself from a number of different addictions for the past 28 years. It's a gift being in recovery, and I'm doing this program so that I can share that gift of recovery with you. This program is about food addiction and the process of recovery from food addiction. So tonight I would like to talk about a concept that is very well known in recovery circles, and it's about control. Before I do that, I'd like to take just a minute and talk about a couple of comments that have been made in the Food Addiction Fair and Firm support group. First of all, I'd like to congratulate so many of you who are making amazing effort and finding really exciting results. A lot of people are sharing their experiences of being abstinent from certain foods. Others are being abstinent from food categories like sugar and simple carbs, and they are reporting that they are feeling well and getting support. People are asking for help, and it's just wonderful because, as one of the major banners on my website says, we don't heal in isolation, we heal in community. And so this is a really great community for us to heal together in. I want to make a clarification. I've been telling some people that it's a good idea to go to a 12-step meeting. I am a big fan of 12-step meetings. I do understand that 12-step meetings are not the only way to go. They're not the only source of support and hope and education for recovery from any addiction. There are many sources. There's Smart Recovery, there's Celebrate Recovery, there's OA. There are all kinds of different places you can go, and you don't have to go to any formal meeting either. You can get on the many, many groups on Facebook that are support groups. You just need to have a place where you can go, ask people your questions, tell them your struggles, ask for tips and suggestions, and use those and report back the things that are working for you, because we don't know what we don't know. And until we hear things from other people that might work from us, sometimes we're confused about how to go about that. So let me say specifically, I like 12-step meetings. I understand that they're not for everybody. I've also said that it's okay for a food addict to attend certain 12-step meetings that aren't specific to food, because in some areas there are no meetings available specific to food. There's no Overeaters Anonymous. There may be no food addiction support groups. It's okay if you want to, and if you're comfortable, to go to an open AA meeting or any open 12-step meeting. And what that means is when you look up 12-step meetings, if you look up AA or NA or whatever, it will tell you if this meeting or that meeting is open or closed. You'll get some resistance if you go to a closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, and you're talking about food addiction. They're not very tolerant of that. But if you're comfortable going to an open meeting for Alcoholics Anonymous and substituting what they talk about in regard to alcohol with food, you're more than welcome to do that. And you might just want to say, I'm an addict. You don't have to be specific. It's not a big deal. So you are welcome at open meetings, and you don't have to go. My point is that we've got to have support. We've got to find support. And if that's a place you feel comfortable going, that's perfectly okay. And if you're not, it's perfectly okay if you don't go there too. So I wanted to clarify that. I want to start talking about this idea of giving up control. A lot of people talk about, I've got to get control over this food thing, or I've got to get control over my weight, or I've got to get control over my diet. And what I want to suggest to you, and in what is a recovery principle in many recovery groups, is that you want to let go of control, actually. It's not about controlling food. It's not about controlling substances. It's not about controlling yourself or your family or your diet. It's about surrendering. I used an example last week, and I did some research online this week just about the topic of letting go of control to gain control, which is, it sounds very confusing. What do you mean I have to let go of control to gain control? Well, I used the example of being in a river and trying to swim upstream, and one of the sources that I found online talked about a similar thing. The woman said when she finds herself, awareness is the first step of change. So when she becomes aware that she's, getting all caught up in the frenzy of, I've got to get control over this. Oh my gosh, I've just got to get control over this. And when she's able to recognize that she's going there, she says she imagines herself in a canoe or a kayak on a little stream or a river. And she's fighting and paddling and fighting and paddling to go against the current, to gain control over this river of thoughts and feelings, and that's represented by the current, by the rush of this river. And when you're fighting against that current, you are going to get worn out and you are not going to win, because eventually you're going to wear down and that current is going to wash you down the river. However, if you go out onto that same river with the same current and you put your paddle down and you sit back, you're free to enjoy the scenery, to enjoy the ride, to feel the waves, to experience what's going on around you. And that's what happens with a lot of us when we get so focused on food, or when we're taken hostage by our addictions. Rational thought is out the window because we're trying to fight it and control it and swim against a very powerful current. I promise you that addiction is way more powerful than your brain or my brain or all of our brains combined. In the recovery circles that I'm most familiar with, which is the 12 steps, and I do like the 12 steps. But again, if you don't like them, that's perfectly okay. I will refer to a lot of the recovery language, but it's applicable worldwide, okay? So this giving up control to gain control is one of those sayings. And you're free to enjoy life, enjoy the ride, when you give up that control. We're going to talk about how to do that. And I'm going to start with where we left off last week, a little bit about what you're giving up if you give up your food addiction, because we talked about the resistance. We talked about why it's so hard to just give up the attempts to control this thing. Addiction is referred to as being cunning, meaning it's smart, it's crafty, it's going to sneak its way in there. It's cunning, it's baffling, it doesn't make any sense. If you try to explain to a person who's never struggled with addiction of any sort, they are not going to get it. Don't expect them to understand, because it makes no rational sense. It doesn't make sense to us that we would go against our own values, against our own desires, against what we say and know we want, when this addiction hijacks our brain. So it's cunning, it's baffling, and I'm telling you, addiction is powerful. So we're pretty powerless against the force of this. It's like a force of nature. It's like a tornado. It comes in your brain and it stirs things up, and we're not thinking straight. So we're going to come back in just a few minutes to this idea of letting go of control. But I want to start where we left off last week. And this goes hand in hand with this letting go of control, but it's about the resistance. And we resist giving up our addictions or the foods that give us temporary relief or escape from our feelings, from the things people noted last week, the fear, the feelings that might surface. We talked about what's it like to spend a little bit of time alone with yourself. Well, a lot of people are afraid to do that for fear of their thoughts or their feelings or what they might think about. So if you're going to give up your addiction, if you're going to surrender it, if you're going to say, I don't need this anymore, here's some other things you're going to give up. And I found this in an article online, but we talked about it last week. We talked about how food is soothing. It's a self-soothing mechanism. So if you're going to give up your addiction or your trigger foods, you're going to give up a form of self-soothing, which may leave you in an abyss going, I don't know how to soothe myself if it's not food. Well, we don't want you to turn to other unhealthy behaviors or substances. We want you to learn healthy coping skills, healthy self-soothing methods. That's why we have support groups. Because you can say, I don't know how to calm myself down when I'm so emotionally overwrought, when I can't think straight, when I'm just so angry or I'm so sad and the emotions feel so huge. That's where other people can give you tips and suggestions, and I'll give you one right now. Think of emotions and thought like on a teeter-totter, right? And when our emotions get so heavy that our thoughts disappear up into the clouds, because it's a teeter-totter, so we got emotions down here and they're very heavy and they're overwhelming us. We need balance, and so in order to balance our heavy, overwhelming emotions, we need to apply logic. So we can call a friend and say, I can't think straight. Can you help me? Give me some logic. Help me make sense of this situation so I don't turn to food or I don't act out or I don't say things I regret. That's one way to do it, but we need help when we're in that situation. So if we're going to let go of control, if we're going to give up our trigger foods or our addiction or our drug of choice, then we're letting go of a means of self-soothing. That's a little scary. Another thing that we're letting go of is social reinforcement. Think about it. You've got eating buddies, right? You've got a group of eating friends. You've got a group of people who you've gone to Weight Watchers meetings with and then gone out to the buffet. I mean, most people have had an experience like that, and that is the group you can commiserate with. So if you change, if you say, I'm going for healthy, and this may be your family. Everybody else in your family may eat poorly or have poor habits. So you're risking giving up a social support group, a social network, and you're going to have to make a new one. Well, that's pretty scary sometimes, right? How do I begin? So you're giving up self-soothing, you're giving up some social reinforcement. You may be giving up, here's one to think about, that could be taken in two different ways. A safeguard against failure. What does that mean? If I give up, if I surrender, if I let go of control, then I'm giving up a safeguard against failure. Well, what that means is, as long as you're active in your addiction, you don't have to really worry about failing, right? Because you're in a comfort zone. You're in a place that says, well, here I am, and now nobody can say, oh, you failed again, or I don't have to beat myself up for failing one more time. So think about that. A place of perceived failure, meaning staying in the addiction, staying in the overeating, choosing the wrong foods, not exercising, means I don't have to risk failing because I'm already in the place that I refer to as that. That's an interesting one, isn't it? All right. We talked about avoidance, right? Food, our addictions are a way to avoid. They're a way to avoid sex sometimes. They're a way to avoid sexual advances or just sexuality all around. They're a way to avoid other forms of intimacy and relationship, I don't have girlfriends because they judge me, we say to ourselves. But maybe the truth is I'm afraid to have female friends because my experiences or what I've seen in a lot of female-to-female friend relationships has been pretty darn ugly. And that was the case with me until I got into recovery and really learned what a female friend is. And boy, let me tell you, I wouldn't give them up for darn near anything because they're that valuable. Another thing that we talked about are addictions. If we surrender, if we let go of trying to control this thing, because that's where all of our energy goes, and we don't have to deal with memories or feelings. So if I'm brave enough or courageous enough to let go, then I'm going to be faced with some of these other things, all right? If I hold on to control, or the perception of control, because really the reality is, think about it, we don't have control over a whole heck of a lot, right? I mean, think about it. Probably 90% of the things in our lives we have no control over. We have no control over the weather. We have no control over natural disasters. We have no control over other drivers. We have no control over our mother's thoughts. We have no control over our children's, what they might say. We just don't have a whole lot of control, and we don't like that. We want something we can control. So if we focus on this food and this nightmare, and we stay in this crazy place of addiction, we think we're controlling something, but we don't have control over that. But if we were to put the paddles out and float down the river, what we would find is that we don't have control over the food out there, the restaurants, the billboards, the TV ads, what other people are eating, what other people are bringing to the office. We have control over what we put in our mouth. And oftentimes it doesn't feel like that, because if we're caught up in that addiction, we don't feel like we have control. So we stay in this chaos, and that's something else we have to give up if we say, I surrender. I surrender. When we say I surrender, it means I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I am so sick and tired of fighting this. I am so sick of counting calories. I am so sick of thinking about food. I am so sick of the number on the scale destroying my day. I am so sick of the way I talk to myself. I am so sick and tired of being sick and tired around this addiction. That bottom that people get to is important, because until you get there, it's really going to be difficult to say I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was listening to something. Okay, this is funny. One of my greatest, it's great to me, personal vices is watching The Young and the Restless. I have watched The Young and the Restless for all 40 years it's been on, I think. And sometimes I post things on Facebook and I say, look what I learned on The Young and the Restless. Because of course there's always people in recovery and having addictions on the soap opera. And so today I was catching up on an episode, and believe me, I'm so far behind. I very rarely get to do this. And I'm not even going to tell you. Okay, I will. I had it on my phone in my car while I was driving. I was not watching it, but I was listening to it. And one of the things somebody said was, I have to think about this. I wrote it down in the car, but I left it in the car. It was, what do you want? What's more important to you? I can't remember what the word was, but it was like the gain or the benefit or the freedom or the fear. What's more important to you? You know, is it more important to you to stay hooked in the fear that comes along with the addiction? The fear of the feelings, the thoughts, the memories, the not knowing how to cope, not knowing how to deal with life as it happens. What's more? What do you want more? You want to hang on to the addiction and the fear, or do you want the freedom that comes from surrendering and saying, I give. Somebody help me. Somebody help me. See, we have a lot of pride and we have a lot of ego, and it's hard for us to say, I need help. I need help badly. I don't know how to do this. But we have to be willing to step outside the comfort zone, even though it's a miserable place. It's comfortable. It's familiar. You know how to live in the misery of addiction. But until that pain is so severe that you say, I have to let go. I have to give up control over this because I can't control it anyway. This addiction is controlling my life. And I'm telling you, it's also really influencing the lives of other people that you love. And that's not real fair. But you got to take that first step. And that first step is saying, you know what? I don't have control. I am super powerless. This addiction is so much more powerful than I am. And I'm afraid. So, some ways to let go of control. It's recognizing what's underneath it. And for most addicts, there are elements of the following things. Fear. Many of you have already expressed, I have a lot of fear associated with the thought of letting go of this, in some ways, beloved friend that may have saved you at one time in your life that you do not need anymore in your adult life. But we have that fear, and so that's out there. Another thing that keeps us bound and drawn into this insanity of addiction is the feeling of unworthiness. And to me, and I've shared this with you before, that is the biggest tragedy. And that's what addiction is about in a lot of ways, because deep inside of ourselves, we don't feel okay. We don't feel like we're good enough. And so we hide and we shelter ourselves in addiction. But we miss out. We miss out on the ride that is life. We miss out on the ease that comes with saying, I surrender. We miss out on the joy and the sights and the smells and the sound and the beauty that really is all around us. But we have to surrender and say, I can't do this. I can't do this by myself. I need help. I need to face the fear and feel it anyway and walk through it. We have to address those feelings of unworthiness and say, I just don't feel okay about me. And we have to address the sources of that unworthiness. And we have to say, that's a bunch of boo hockey. You know, that is just a bunch of crap. And we have to stop talking to ourselves like we're unworthy. We have to talk to ourselves like, we got it going on, right? Not in a cocky way, but I'm good enough. I can get out there with the rest of them. So that's another thing. And another thing is there's a lack of trust. That goes a little bit deeper, and we'll get into that as we go along. But somewhere along the line, a lot of us lost trust. And we lost trust in the people around us who were supposed to take care of us, and the people around us who were supposed to teach us how to live life in healthy ways. And we lost trust because a lot of times we would see things and we would know things that were going on, but people would tell us, that's not right. That's not what, Daddy's not drunk. Daddy's just taking a nap. Whatever it was, right? We would know something, and the people around us would kind of alter our reality a little bit, but that's kind of deep, all right? But here's what controlling costs us. Here's what living in this world of obsession with food and focus on food and weight and numbers and diets. Please don't ever diet again. That's a horrible, horrible word. Here's what we give up. And conversely, here's what we find when we surrender and we learn about living healthy lives without addiction. We give up joy. 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 I tell you the story that I tell of the experience of joy that I first understood when I first got into recovery was when my toddler daughter came toddling down the stairs in the middle of the night. She was probably 3. And I was studying. I was in my master's program, and it was late at night, and she came downstairs and she said, "Mommy, will you rock me?" And many times in my life before that, I would have said, "Honey, I'm busy. Let me take you back up to bed, whatever," because I was busy and I was afraid of that connection with her. But as I got into recovery and was willing to experience my feelings, I said to her, "Yeah, let me rock you." And while I rocked her, in those few minutes that I rocked her, the thought that I had was, in this moment, in these few moments of rocking my baby daughter, who I've been so afraid of, so afraid to be a mother to because I wasn't good enough to be a mother. In those moments of holding her and feeling her and loving her and comforting her and receiving comfort from her, I knew what joy was. And I knew that in addiction, I had never, ever in my life experienced that feeling. And that's when I knew I was going to do what I do. I was going to help people, if they were willing, to go and learn what living in freedom from addiction was, so they could experience moments of joy like that. We give up freedom, we give up peace, we give up a lot of our energy because it's all going to this when we're in our addictions. We give up ease of living. We give up, go with the flow. We give up, don't get hung up on the little things. When we find how to live in recovery, when we let go of our addiction, we get those things. We get joy. We get freedom. We get, nothing's that big of a deal. My daughter, gets all worried and all worked up about her job and whatever. I'm like, honey, it's not that big a deal. So, how do we let go? How do we expand our capacity to let go? You got to be honest with yourself. You got to be honest with what you're afraid to look at. Maybe sit down and write a list. If I let go of my addiction, then I got to face this, and this. Therapists are good to work with when you do that sort of thing, right? And you got to ask yourself, am I really willing to let go? A lot of things we say, okay, I'm willing to let it go, and then we yank it back, right? I do that a lot. There's certain aspects of my ego that I have to continually go. It's one of those things, if somebody else does something, it's like, well, why am I not speaking at that event? Or why, it's like, let it go, Connie. Because you're not supposed to be at that event, or you're not supposed to be speaking to that audience, or you're not. I have to, initially I'll feel the feelings, I'll go through it, and then I'll talk to a friend, or I'll work through it. I'll go, you know what? It's the way it's supposed to be. Let it go, all right? You got to think, who's going to support me? You've got to have people in place that you can count on to be there for you. Not all the time, but, you got to have a whole bunch of people, because maybe the first 4 aren't available to you at that particular moment, all right? So surrendering doesn't mean I give up. It's not the same thing at all. It doesn't mean I don't care, give in to my addiction, whatever. No. It means trusting that many people before you, before me, have gone through the process of letting go of addictions. It's about learning to trust that there is a way out, and learning to trust that those other people who are working their way out, who have worked their way out and are living a healthy program of recovery, will help you along the road. It's trusting because you see them. It's trusting because you listen to them. It's trusting because the process works. But you have to give in to the process and work it and let it work with you. And effort is a huge part of that, right? I said, don't try. Don't try. You've got to do. Because trying is dying. Doing gets it done, right? Doing is reaching out and saying, I need some help. Doing is saying, I'm having a meltdown. Doing is saying, I caved today. Can you help me quit beating myself up about this and get over this? Doing is what gets you there. So I want you to think about what it means for you if you're going to surrender, if you're going to not give up, but give up the fight. Give in to the process of recovery, give in to the beauty and the joy, and give in to the fears. Give in to looking at a lot of the things you're going to have to look at. Now, for those of you who haven't gotten the book yet and have ordered it, I truly apologize. The beginning of this process is always very difficult. It's not as simple as me sending you a book. I don't have any of them. I have not seen the book yet myself. I haven't opened the book. I haven't seen it. It's all done at Amazon. So those of you who ordered directly from Amazon did get it sooner, and I feel terrible about that. If you ordered off my website, you'll be getting your book in the next couple of days. It's just there's another step in the process, and at the beginning there's always a little bit of a hang-up and snags, just like there was trying to get it onto Kindle. A lot of this we have to do ourselves, and a lot of it we have to work with Amazon. So I very much apologize. But when you get your book, read the part about the lake that you have to go through, because that's what I'm talking about. Because there's no way out but through. And you can get through because you can trust that other people have gone through and are living to tell about it. I'm one of them, and there are a lot of others. So continue to reach out in the Food Addiction Fair and Firm Facebook support group. If you're not in there, just let me know and I'll put you in there. We have to be friends on Facebook, so if you want to be in that group, we have to be friends. Thank you so much to everybody who is participating and sharing in there. It just gives me chills every time I read it. Thank you to all of you who are here. Please share these videos with your friends. There are many people out there, whether or not they've had weight loss surgery, whether or not they are big or small in size, who suffer from food addiction and other addictions. This stuff is the same no matter what the addiction is. We're just happen to be talking about food. I appreciate the time you take. All of these videos are housed both on my website and on my YouTube page. And they're also on the Facebook page, but sometimes you have to dig through to find those. So thank you again for your time. I want you to remember, A, there's no way out but through. B, you have to give in to get out. And that there are people to hold your hand along the way. I am your recovery conscience, meaning you're going to hear my voice telling you, hey, just say not now to your food, maybe later. I don't need this today. I don't need this anymore. 1 minute at a time. Use my tip jar. So listen for me. I'll be there with you. And remember that your health is your responsibility. This day and every day. Okay, thanks again, and I will talk with you all soon. Good night.